This episode is brought to you by Dr. Jason Dean and Full Moon Protocol, which provides all natural detoxification from parasitic conditions due to the food we eat. And it also fights inflammation. Go to bravetv.store/mission to save $20 off your first order. That's bravetv.store/mission. Our guests today are on the front lines advancing fact-based public policy analysis through the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs. Brandon Dutcher, the Senior Vice President, is listed in the Heritage Foundation Guide to Public Policy Experts and is an editor and the author of many award-winning articles. Ryan Haynie serves as the Criminal Justice Reform Fellow. His work has included representing the criminally accused in state and federal courts. He is active in the Federalist Society, serving as the programming director for the Oklahoma City Lawyers Chapter. Welcome to Moms on a Mission, Brandon and Ryan.
Good to be with you.
Thank you both. Well, would you each share a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Well, you gave a good intro there. OCPA is a think tank. We've been around 30 years now. We're in our 30th year, and I've been with them virtually from the beginning. I was on the board first and been on staff for 28 years. And so the closest way I describe it is we're like the Heritage Foundation. Most people have heard of the Heritage Foundation in Washington. We're a state level think tank. So we do research, analysis, programming, putting on speeches, giving testimony, bringing in speakers, all the things that a think tank do. And beyond that, we're also a do tank. We do advocacy and lobbying and other things as well to help move public policy. It's good to write papers and provide information, but you also need to make lawmakers feel the heat and do the right thing, whether they want to or not. So we do a lot of that now in our 30th year, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, I bet you're busier now more than ever. And Ryan, what is your part in OCPA?
Well, so I came on board in 2020, kind of like right in the middle of the pandemic. So I think my start date was in June of 2020. I come from a law background. I practiced law, as you mentioned, first sort of in the criminal defense context, but then for several years doing commercial litigation in Oklahoma City, was pretty dissatisfied with that. I was a conservative when I went to law school, but I never really thought I would be a movement lawyer or anything like that. I wanted to do oil and gas law or be a prosecutor or whatever. But was pretty dissatisfied with what I was doing in law practice, and had been following OCPA's work for several years. Was very on board. Was on board with what they were trying to do with trying to eliminate the state income tax, universal school choice, all those sorts of things. And so whenever I saw that they were hiring someone to come on and work on criminal justice policy, I jumped at the opportunity, and Brandon was nice enough to hire me. And shortly after I came on, Jonathan asked me if I also wanted to be general counsel for the organization. And I was happy to do that, which at the time really only meant sort of overseeing some outside counsel in some litigation that we're involved with a payroll company here in Oklahoma City. But more recently, it's turned into actually doing some real lawyering, including working on this case where the ACLU challenged Oklahoma's ban on quote unquote gender affirming care for minors.
Yes, I want to talk about that in a few minutes. I wanted to just ask you both, what are some of the big wins OCPA has had and experienced in the last 30 years?
Oh boy, there have been a lot, which is surprising because early on, we were just a voice crying in the wilderness. No one even knew we were here. We certainly weren't getting any policy wins. Of course, Democrats controlled the legislature and the governor's office. So that was a different world back then. But we played a role in right to work. We've pushed through workers' comp reform, tort reform, state income tax. We still have one, but instead of 7%, it's 4.75 and going down. Ryan, help me think of other wins. The biggest by far is universal school choice. We've been pushing for that for 28 years. And finally, just a few months ago, we got it. So I would say that's the biggest win, but we've had many. and many more to come.
Yeah,
I mean, Brandon definitely hit the highlights there. I mean, are there a lot of other sort of smaller wins or things that we've sort of tangentially been involved in? Yes, but I think those are the highlights.
So the mission of your group, the OCPA, the mission, is it to preserve and advance conservative values in the state of Oklahoma?
Yes, it is. To achieve conservative policy victories. So our principles are free enterprise, limited government, individual initiative, strong families, and preserving and defending culture against this current onslaught from woke radicals, which is, the left has marched through the institutions for decades, but it just seems like in the last few years, it's just been an overdrive. And we're seeing stuff now where, I put on our group email this morning, now there's an elementary school in Oklahoma City that has hired not one drag queen, but two drag queens to work at the school. One of them's the principal, one of them's a paraprofessional for kindergarten. I mean, what world are we living in?
Yeah.
It's insane. So new challenges come up. We're there to fight them. And this ban on inhumane science experiments on children is one of them. That's another big one we're proud of. We weren't solely responsible, but we played a part, and now Ryan is helping to defend the law, so we're very proud of that.
I wanted to speak to those drag queen teachers and that situation in Oklahoma City. I did read about that. It did make national news and not, of course, mainstream media, but I think what I find so interesting is the dichotomy represented here, because, we can't teach Jesus in schools. We can't have Bibles in schools, even though that's what our experimental constitutional republic was founded on, was not just religion, but on Judeo-Christian values. And so they don't want any religion in schools. But let's be honest, this drag queen social contagion of transgenderism and drag queen life is a religion. It is a cult, and they are activists and actively trying to, and successfully doing it. So actively trying to change the culture in our schools and consequently our nation. And so I just wonder, how can you possibly justify having drag queens as principals and teachers when, we're not supposed to have religion in schools, supposedly?
Well, Ryan, I'll let you jump into that. I'll just say, of course, you can't justify. No one with any moral at all would justify such a thing. But this points to why it's so important that we got universal school choice this year, because now finally parents have some purchasing power. Parents have some leverage. In the past, parents may not have liked what was going on in school, whether it was whole language or whether it was sex ed or, something seemingly tame by today's standards. And now it's drag queens. Well, now parents are like, okay, I'm out of here. Finally, I can afford to go to Christian Heritage Academy or Metro Christian or whatever it may be. That's why school choice is so important. The left, they're going to do what they do. Ryan, I don't want to monopolize this conversation.
Well, this is your bailiwick, Brandon. But I mean, I echo everything you said and everything that Miriam said as well. I mean, it is a woke religion. It has a liturgy. It has a redemption story. It has sacraments. I mean, I've long said that like abortion is the sacrament of the religious left. So it has all the hallmarks of religion. But because they don't meet on Sunday, they're allowed to sort of run rampant Monday through Friday in public schools.
Yeah, that's the sacraments of abortion. Boy, that's powerful. And that is so, so true. I think what's so fascinating to me, being an analytical person, is just, even not just in this situation, but what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, is just that the truth and facts no longer are our guide and no longer dictate the direction and course of our education and of our government for that matter. I mean, we are trying to pull up the anchor of truth, pull up the anchor and the moral compass of Judeo-Christian roots and govern by feelings. And, if you feel like a girl, or feel like a boy, or you feel like a drag queen, then that's okay. And it's not only just okay, but it's okay for you to advance your agenda and shove that down the throats of, children and families. So I'm thrilled about the school choice, and I'm thrilled that now we can vote instead of just at the ballot box. We can vote with our money and our green dollar bill, and not just a ballot.
Absolutely. Vote with your feet.
Yes. Well, so let's talk about this ban that you're having to defend. So, I was just say, thankfully, there is a new state law here in Oklahoma that prevents children younger than 18 from being subjected to sex change surgeries or given puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones, and that's Senate Bill 613. But OCPA had to file a brief defending this ban in Oklahoma because there is a case, Peter Poe versus Gettner Drummond, who is our quote-unquote Republican Attorney General in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Oklahoma. Why would the Republican AG fight this ban?
So he is actually fighting on behalf of the law. So I think there were a lot of people early on that were upset that the Attorney General's office agreed to stay execution of the law and not enforce the law while the case was being briefed and while a decision on a preliminary injunction was being made. But that was really, I mean, frankly, that was a pragmatic decision that was made based on the availability of their staff and what they already had going on. And by allowing that stay of execution, they were able to have more time to fully brief it, to find some experts, some physician experts who could come in and say, look, this is experimental. The science doesn't back this, but also find some witnesses who are people that we refer to as detransitioners, right? And this is one of the areas where OCPA helped the Attorney General's office. Is we because of some of the connections we have both in like the conservative legal movement in Oklahoma, but also more broadly across the country, we were able to identify some people and send them to basically connect them with the AG's office, people who transitioned not even as minors, right? Like a few of these people transitioned as adults, and yet still 5-6 years later, we're finding that, hey, this didn't solve my issues. Now I'm I've had a double mastectomy, but it didn't fix what was wrong with, like, in my head, right? And so if that's the case for adults that transitioned as adults, how much more important is it to protect minors who don't have the same brain development and ability to reason and make sound choices? So the ACLU and a group called Lambda Legal, which is a sort of a, I guess you'd call them a legal organization that is centered around litigation with respect to what we might call like the gender ideology stuff, LGBTQ, like the whole alphabet soup, right? They brought a lawsuit on behalf of several children and parents in Oklahoma who want to continue or want to get this type of quote unquote treatment in the future. And so the Attorney General filed its brief responding to the legal arguments, and we can get into that if you'd like.
I was just wondering what the state of the lawsuit was as well.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the lawsuit was filed, I believe, in May, and what they asked for was what's called a temporary injunction. And a temporary injunction means that the law would not go into effect while the case is proceeding, so that later on when you go to a bench trial and a judge decides whether or not the law is constitutional or not, for good, that temporary injunction is what dictates what happens sort of in the meantime. So the Attorney General filed their response to the temporary injunction, and then we filed our amicus brief. A bunch of other groups filed amicus briefs as well. And right now the judge is reviewing all of those and is going to make a decision. There's not going to be a hearing. The parties felt like they had briefed the issue well. And so I'll tell you, based on what is going on outside of Oklahoma, and it's probably worth getting into all of that as well, I would expect a decision to be made a temporary decision on the temporary injunction in early October. And the reason I say that is because these cases are being filed all over the country. There was a case filed in the Middle District of Tennessee. There was a case filed in Alabama. I mean, really the laws are very similar. So the cases are also very similar. And in those cases, the district court, the trial court, ruled against the state in both instances. And then in, I believe, July, the Sixth Circuit, who is the appellate court for the Tennessee court, reversed in what they called what did they call it? It was a preliminary decision, and said, we actually don't think the ACLU's got a good chance of winning in this case, and we're overturning that decision. Also, the 11th Circuit, which is the appellate court for the Alabama court, also reversed and said, no, we also don't think you've got a good chance of winning. So now this district court judge in Tulsa has two circuit courts, neither of which are his appellate court, but two circuit courts that have said, we don't think the ACLU's got a good chance of winning on this temporary injunction. Now, the reason I say early October, and I'm getting a little long-winded here, but I'll wrap it up soon. The reason I say early October is because the Sixth Circuit opinion was a temporary decision, and they're going to come out with a more robust decision, they said, by the end of September. And so I think if the judge here in Oklahoma is going to rely on those two circuit opinions, I think he's going to want to make sure that the full, more permanent opinion that comes down in the Sixth Circuit they don't change their mind. Now, that said, I mean, I've read the opinion. I don't think they're going to change their minds, but you don't want to hang your hat on something and then they reverse course and kind of pull the rug out from underneath you.
Yeah. So will they agree on this, or once this temporary injunction, once this comes out, the ruling on that, then will there be a regular lawsuit that, like, where it's in court and it's a trial kind of thing? Will that follow that decision?
In all likelihood, yes. I mean, it's possible that if the ACLU loses on the temporary injunction, it's possible that they don't go through the time and expense of a full-blown, hearing. I think that's probably unlikely, but the reality is, and I think that this is why the ACLU filed in the Northern District, which sits in Tulsa, is because the Northern and Eastern districts in Oklahoma are just slammed with McGirt cases. And so my friend who's an attorney up in Tulsa is telling his clients in civil matters, hey, if you're filing or a defendant in the Northern District of Oklahoma, I would not expect a trial for 5 to 10 years. Because they just have so many McGirt cases. And so if your audience doesn't know about McGirt and the implications that has on Eastern Oklahoma, they really should go to our website, ocpathink.org, search for McGirt, get up to speed on that and all of the implications there, because that's a huge issue. But it's implicated in this case as well, because they are prioritizing those McGirt criminal cases, which they ought to do, frankly. And so however this is decided, however this judge decides, unless it gets appealed up to the 10th Circuit and it reverses, that will be the law in Oklahoma for, I think, the foreseeable future, while this case continues to be litigated. And so it's possible, like I said, that a full-fledged hearing, kind of a trial type hearing, would not happen for quite a while. And so, if the state wins, then the law that was passed by the legislature would go into effect and would be the law in Oklahoma for the foreseeable future. So
it would be okay if it took a while because of that temporary injunction, and that would be great.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, could this, and I don't know the legal ramifications of this, so that's why I'm asking you, but could this be established as a precedent setter, like nationally, or is it just a precedent within the state under state law?
So it would be binding precedent for that district. It would be what we call persuasive in other jurisdictions. Just like the Sixth Circuit and the 11th Circuit, which have come down with favorable rulings, they're not binding on the court there in Tulsa, but they are quite persuasive. Now, it's likely that if you found it's it's possible that you could find a court or a circuit that would go the other way, and then you have what's called a circuit split. And that's when the Supreme Court would be interested in taking a look at it and ruling one way or the other whether these laws are constitutional. But right now, the two circuits that have looked at it have both, to my knowledge, I don't think there's a third, have both come down on the side of the state being able and having the authority to ban this type of experimental medical procedures for minors.
And I just wanted to speak to the results that these physicians you've worked with. I'm so grateful for them. But like it says, the brief notes that puberty blockers have been linked to, quote, life-altering side effects, including decreased bone density, cognitive impairment, polycystic ovarian syndrome, metabolic syndrome, and greater risk of infertility for males. The brief notes that the use of cross-sex hormones is associated with, quote, numerous health risks such as thromboembolic disease. I might have just butchered that word, including blood clots, including gallstones, coronary artery disease, heart attacks. I mean, the list, I mean, it's almost a whole page of all the side effects from these hormones and the negative effects of the surgery. We had Chloe Cole on. I'm sure you know her. She's a national detransitioner name. And she was saying, listen, puberty is not negotiable. And when you have these sex hormones and these things you're administering to these children, not only are they in the most insecure, transient time of their life, you know, it's proven that in middle school at this age, I mean, they revert back to some of their toddler mannerisms because they're just growing and they're just not stable. And we have all these rules about, you know, driving. You can't drive a rental car till you're 21. I mean, all these rules are in place because kids' frontal lobes are not developed and they're not in a good place to make permanent life-altering decisions. And the left is trying to make the case that this is not a big deal. And this is abusive and this harms kids forever. They're making decisions, you know, like Chloe Cole getting a double mastectomy. It's going to affect her for the rest of her life. And I guess my question is, when there's such solid science to back up this ban in Oklahoma and Alabama and in all these other states, when there's so much science to prove the negative life-scarring abusive effects of these hormones and these surgeries, I mean, what legally, like what leg could they possibly stand on to allow this legally?
Well, you know, it's a good question. And there's, I guess, a number of ways to answer it. You know, I'll start with, you mentioned our brief. The nice thing about an amicus brief, you know, the legal term or the Latin term is amicus curiae, which means friend of the court. And the beautiful thing about these kind of briefs that we filed that with a group called Do No Harm, who Chloe Cole is associated with. And so they joined us on that brief. But the fun thing about these briefs is you're not limited to the legal arguments, right? Like the Attorney General's office or the Solicitor General made all the legal arguments, and they did a great job, by the way, of making the legal arguments. But we were able to come in and really swing from the rafters and attack these other groups that also filed briefs, right? Like the American Medical Association, but Brandon talked about the long march through the institutions that the left did, and the reality is we have this smorgasbord of alphabet soup agencies, right? The American Psychiatric Association, the Endocrinologists Association, and they're all filled with radical leftists. Their members don't necessarily agree with them, but their boards and their leadership are all radical leftists. And so we were able to come in and just hammer those groups. So, I mean, our brief really centered around three different arguments, and I'll touch briefly on the first two because I think those are the ones that touch on your question. And the first part was that these kind of experimental treatments, as you said, they cause very real harm. They have a lot of unknown risks. I mean, our brief talks about 90% of the research was done in the last 20 years. So like thinking about long-term effects, like the research that has been done just isn't even able to touch long-term effects, right? And that they offer no proven benefits. So, you know, one of the things that I think parents need to hear is that if your child comes to you and says, hey, I think I'll be transgender, and their school counselor says, hey, if you don't go along with this, they're going to commit suicide. That is totally bunk. There is no data to back that up, right? That whenever the science controls for other comorbidities, because a lot of these people are already suffering from other mental health issues, right? So like people suffering from mental health issues commit suicide, right? I mean, like it's that, and that's tragic. But the answer is not to carve those people up, or especially children, right? Like the answer is to treat those mental health conditions. And so what the science shows is that whenever you control for that, there's no difference between suicide between people who have gender dysphoria and those who don't, that also have these other mental health issues. And then the second argument that we made is that the court should not permit politically motivated medical interest groups to set the constitutional standard. And the Sixth Circuit opinion, which I have in front of me, really hammers that in a way that I think is really strong, and I can talk about that in a minute. But what we argued is that these groups, for one, they talk out of both sides of their mouth, right? So one of the groups that did file a brief says, hey, it's totally fine. Kids are able to make these decisions for themselves. But a few years ago, in a Supreme Court brief, they argued that children should not be subject to the death penalty. And frankly, and I'm in agreement with that. Like I fought for a long time to try to not have minors be subjected to life without the possibility of parole, because, and they argued in this other brief, like their prefrontal cortex isn't developed, right? I mean, like they make rash decisions, their decision-making capabilities are not fully developed. And so it's like, for one, they're taking two totally different approaches depending on what the actual issue is. And then furthermore, these people have opinions on the most bizarre things. And surprise, surprise, they always come down on the left, right? So, I've got the brief in front of us. It's hilarious, right? Critical race theory, they have opinions on critical race theory, gun control, immigration, climate change, affirmative action, nuclear weapons, and biological warfare. Surprise, surprise, these same groups all come down on the political left on all of these issues. I mean, they're political actors. The idea that they are somehow neutral arbiters of truth or science is frankly laughable. But and this is where the Sixth Circuit came in, with a solid legal argument. Assume for the sake of argument that they were. I mean, right? I mean, like, assume that these people are just neutral. They don't have an agenda. It really doesn't make sense, right? And this is what the Sixth Circuit says. It says that many members of the medical community support the plaintiffs is surely relevant, but it is not dispositive. For the same reason, we would not defer to a consensus among economists about the proper incentives for interpreting the impairment of contracts or taking clauses of the U.S. Constitution, right? I mean, the consensus of medical experts, quote unquote, or economists, or name your field of expertise, is not dispositive on what the Constitution says about whether or not you can use experimental treatments for off-label use, right? I mean, I think that was like the long-winded way to answer your question. So hopefully, but if you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer that.
I think that's great because, and thankfully our Constitution means something anymore. When you look back, this was a question I had for Brandon. I wanted to know, like, when you look back prior to COVID, I mean, Brandon, do you feel like in 2020, when all that came down the pike, do you feel like there were more issues and things were more exposed then? Like maybe the radical left wasn't hiding these things so much anymore, and that, with the unfortunate killing of George Floyd and things like that, and the COVID, that these were like little sparks that just created this feeling of being emboldened and being able to just come out straight out and try to do these things. I mean, Brandon, do you see a difference before 2020?
I think you hit on it perfectly. It was COVID and the summer of George everything just went crazy, and it has continued to go crazy. I mean, in OCPA's early days, we talked about tax cuts. We talked about workers' comp. We didn't talk about what is a woman. I mean, no one talked about that. But again, the radical left, and they have no limiting principle. They have no brakes. They're going to continue to do crazy things like hire a drag queen to be a kindergarten paraprofessional because they have no brakes. They're going to keep doing crazy things, much to the benefit of someone like Ryan Walters and others. I mean, they just can't hide the crazy. And so, yeah, it was, the decline has been, the slippery slope. But then you're right. The spring and summer of 2020, things just took off, and we're in a strange new world now, as Carl Truman says.
Yeah. I read Battle for the American Mind. You had Pete Hegseth speak at your last meeting, and I was fortunate enough to get to meet him. And that book was life-changing for me. And we've talked about it on this Moms on a Mission podcast about how, the Marxists came over and started infiltrating our commanding heights in these universities a long time ago, over 100 years ago. And while we, as the United States, were distracted with, fiscal Marxism and things and communism, all the while the Marxists realized that, political policies were downstream from culture. And if they could change the culture, then they would be able to change the political policies. And it's just unbelievable to me that it festered and it grew for so long. And then COVID was just like all the covers came off and we could see everything so clearly. So I was wondering about that, if you noticed that as well. Well, we have listeners from all over the nation, and I was just wondering, how can people learn more about Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs and provide support? But also, how could people, maybe if they're living in Colorado or Florida or another state, are there chapters like OCPA? I mean, obviously it's not Oklahoma, but how could people who are out of state, how could they get involved with their local chapters?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing is go to our website, ocpathink.org, and you can sign up for our email and so forth. But there are little free market think tanks in each of the 50 state capitals. So no matter what state you're in, there's a conservative think tank in your state. There's also a conservative family policy council in your state, which OCPA is also a family policy council. So whether you're more concerned about tax cuts or pro-life or whatever in between, there is a conservative organization in your state. You can find it. But I would start at ocpathink.org.
Okay, and their website. Go ahead. Sorry, Ryan.
I was just saying, to find those groups, I don't know. I'm sure the Family Policy Council has a list of their members, but if you go to spn.org, there's a directory there where you can find their free market think tank.
Right.
spn.org.
That's and the same with the Family Policy Alliance, and you can find the state chapter there.
That's great. I think the work that OCPA is doing is so profound and so needed and such a blessing to our state. Even if you are not necessarily a conservative, just having someone stand up for truth and science and our Constitution and backing that is just so incredible and helpful. And we're so grateful for you. And we do need to reach out and go to your website and donate financially, donate with your time, and reach out and see, in what ways we can support OCPA. But I just wanted to say thank you both, Brandon and Ryan, for coming on today, and thanks for sharing about this lawsuit and the wonderful work that OCPA has done for 30 years. Congratulations! What an amazing organization, and a feat to just be growing stronger and stronger every single year. So thank you both so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Can I add one more thing before we go?
Yes,
to talk on what Brandon said? If you're concerned about what's going on in your state, call your lawmaker. It's hard to overstate how much that matters, because oftentimes what we find is that if they get one or two calls opposing an issue, they get scared. I think that's the right word. I mean, it's amazing how one or two calls, one or two personal emails, I mean, the more the better, right? But I think I'm not a big believer in calling your federal lawmakers, because they represent so many people, and frankly, they get nothing done in Washington. All of the policy is done at the state level and local level, for that matter. So it really is important to call, email your lawmakers. Certainly do action alerts if you're, if a group like OCPA sends an action alert, but send something personalized. Give them a call, because it's insanely important.
100%.
I'm glad you said that. I've done that myself. I mean, sadly, before 2020, I didn't know who my state senator was. I didn't know, but I got involved in a local grassroots effort here in Tulsa called Women for Tulsa, led by Christy Rawlings. I also got involved in Moms for Liberty, led by Janice Danforth here in Tulsa. And I believe the Moms for Liberty group is, all over the nation, has multiple chapters. So that's a way, that we moms and parents and grandparents can get involved too. But I'd love for people to go to your website and check it out and try to find an organization like you all in their state. So thank you both for joining us today. And we would love to get connected with you. Just go to momsonamission.net and fill out your information, and we can stay in touch via email. And then also our website is momsonamission.net. That's momsonamission.net. And then if you have any questions or comments, as always, email us at moms@momsonamission.net. That's moms@momsonamission.net. And please follow us on your favorite platform. And thanks for listening. In light of recent bank volatility and skyrocketing inflation, diversification is a must. That's why I use my good friend Andrew Sorcini at Beverly Hills Precious Metals. Beverly Hills Precious Metals makes it so easy to diversify. I personally ordered some silver and it arrived on my doorstep just a few days later. They make it so easy. And if you're not ready to do that and you just want to ask a few questions, they're there for you too. I personally got some silver and also am rolling over some of my IRA. You can actually roll over your IRA and have it be backed by silver and gold. So if you don't have any extra money to invest in silver and gold, rolling over a 401k or an IRA, or even part of it, if you just want to try it at first, just for a little bit, you can do that as well. So go to bh-pm.com today and ask all your questions. You can connect with somebody. And like I said, you can just get some information at first if you want and pray about it, and then get back with them to roll over part of your IRA or all of it, or order some gold and silver. That's bh-pm.com. and tell them that Moms on a Mission sent you. Hey, everybody. Did you know that recent research from the CDC says that millions of Americans develop parasitic infections and symptoms often go unnoticed or are misdiagnosed? Parasites are actually the cause of many health problems such as anxiety, depression, chronic pain, fatigue, and unexplained digestive issues. We all need a common sense strategy to improve our health. Moms on a Mission encourages you to reach out to our good friend, Dr. Jason Dean. Dr. Dean's Full Moon Protocol provides all natural detoxification and fights inflammation. And the supplements are made with 100% organic ingredients and are proven to kill parasites safely and effectively. I know after I took Full Moon Protocol, I had more energy. To order your Full Moon Protocol today, go to bravetv.store/mission to save $20 off your first order. That's bravetv.store/mission. According to leading sleep experts and sleephealth.org, over 50 million Americans struggle getting a good night's rest. That's why Moms on a Mission loves MyPillow. MyPillow makes amazing pillows, sheets, mattress toppers, robes, towels, literally almost everything you need for a good night's sleep. They also make dog beds for your dogs. So by going to mypillow.com, typing in the code MISSION, you not only receive a high quality product, but you're supporting Moms on a Mission and this podcast. If you like what you're hearing and you agree with it, you believe in it, and you want to support Moms on a Mission, then go to mypillow.com today and order some high quality products and just type in the code MISSION at checkout and you can save up to 66% off. That's mypillow.com, code MISSION.
Since 2014, Organic Body Essentials has offered clean, simple, certified organic skincare. Our organic face-to-feet and federally compliant hemp and pet products are manufactured under USDA and FDA guidelines. Our products are inspired by God using plants He created. In Ezekiel 47:12, it says, "The fruit is for food and the leaves for healing." We believe in the power of God to heal, so we pray over our products and for our customers. Our therapy in a bottle approach has been widely received, and our customers' testimonials continue to inspire us. You can find us at organicbodyessentials.com and obe.organicbodyessentials.com. Please feel welcome to reach out with questions. Use coupon code MISSION at checkout for a discount. Thank you for your support by using Mission at checkout to benefit moms on a mission and their quest to reestablish traditional values in our education system and empowerment for a healthy lifestyle.